Don, just to tee this up a little bit to get us started, the kind of meta theme we're exploring has to do with how the spiritual path is evolving and how it needs to evolve to meet the challenges of our moment in history. And as I've been reflecting on some of the ways that spirituality is already evolving, one of the things I've observed is that there seems to be a new kind of spiritual impulse stirring in many of us. A lot of the people who come to me are speaking in a different kind of language than I think traditional spiritual seekers were speaking in. You know, traditionally when somebody felt this kind of deep longing, kind of mystical longing to give themselves to God, to engage in deep transformative practice, the only option that was available to them was to in some way leave the world behind. There was this impulse to either they would go into the monastery or the ashram or go live in a cave or become a wandering ascetic, but there was always this sense of, you know, get away from the sort of corrupt world and go and pursue your spiritual transformation. And yet many of us today are feeling called to live a different kind of authentic, meaningful spiritual life. So many people now, you know, speak about this desire to find a way to live that's deeply aligned with our most profound spiritual experiences, intuitions, and values, and yet, rather than pulling us out of the stream of worldly life, one that thrusts us into meaningful engagement with the life process. A lot of, you know, spiritually motivated people now feel as strongly pulled to transform the world as they do to transform themselves, and I think there's a growing sense that those two movements, you know, to transform me, to evolve the world, are really parts of one movement. And yet because this is such a new impulse, I think the great wisdom traditions of the world don't have a lot to say about it canonically in their ancient scriptures. You know, we're living in such a radically different world than the world in which those great traditions came into being. Back then, it wasn't even known that we were part of an evolving upward process. It was kind of believed that the world was basically fixed or cyclical, and you just had to somehow find a way to get out of it, to find your kind of spiritual redemption in some way. And so we don't have ancient maps to help us navigate this new emerging spiritual impulse. And I mean, to me, I just think it's an incredibly exciting time in that so many of us now feel inspired to get involved, to give our life energies to helping transform and evolve the world, and from a deeply spiritual place. What does it mean to be an agent of evolution in today's world? What are the kind of qualities, understandings, and perspectives one needs to be genuinely effective as an evolutionary change agent?
My experience has been over the last, I guess, couple of decades that because the ancients didn't have to cope with modern entity, they were, I guess, pre-modern in terms of that pre-modern, modern, post-modern integral sweep. So they didn't have to encounter the kinds of challenges and the kind of value structures that we do today in terms of advanced weaponry, in terms of the vast allure of objects and things and money and success that characterize societies that have emerged into our fifth level, our achievement-driven, technology-sensitive improvement value system, which has brought wonderful things to us in terms of many, many gifts, but of course at a serious price. So now we're thinking about from success to significance and how our lives can go beyond the traditional bottom line and kind of enjoyments that we have in life, knowing that there is something really better for us, not in the typical pie in the sky when we die, hope of heaven and bliss in that spiritual kingdom, but rather the satisfaction of doing something now for the betterment of humanity, as we, in a sense, have detected that we're not flatlanders, that we're on an evolutionary surge that deeply embedded in our genetics and what we call our mimetics is the constant, never-ending quest and a longing for something new and different and better. Because when we think that we have achieved the ultimate, we wake up one morning and say, it's not what I thought it was. And so there's yet another ache. It's that ache that is searching for fulfillment today. Certainly in spiritual practices, one can find relief from that. But I'm more interested in the old expression, stop the world, I want to get off. That we get overwhelmed with so many different things today that we lose our bearing, our moral compass. And we simply don't know how to find that meaningful life, if I use that term, or we wish not just to think about ourselves and even this generation, but the long evolutionary sweep of humanity itself as it emerges through all kinds of experiences, good and bad, until we reach this stage in the 21st century. Well, just as we've explored in the human genome some of the unique patterns that form us biologically, we are now, and this is from our perspective in what we call the Human Memome Project, are just now coming to grips with core value systems, how they form, how they emerge, why they fight, because today we have the technology to destroy our species like the ancients didn't have. There's quite a difference in bows and arrows or even machine guns and the kind of horrible weaponry that exists and that can be suddenly grabbed by very less complex value systems with whole different agendas. So at one hand, many of us sense the whole world is in danger, life itself, and many who are working on the matter of climate control, and that are obviously bring to our attention the fact that in one sense the game is up, that we're not going to be able to enjoy the level of affluence that satisfied us and even our parents, and we won't be able to project that to our children. So one big interest in spirituality, I think, translates into that particular thing, as our very good friend and colleague Peter Murray in Netherlands and many others like him are doing major work in order to find ways for us to preserve this very unique habitat that we call planet Earth. I think a second evolutionary trend that we must become agents of is finally coming to grips with our humanity. That why is it we pass through clans and tribes and empires and get locked in holy wars where we kill in the name of God or kill in the name of Allah and other destructive systems that we have encountered in our long passageway to the level of affluence and good life that we have today. Because fact is, Craig, there are billions of people that are moving through different levels of development that don't go to Maui or even Denton, Texas. And we're finding today that they make a difference. In our fragmented world, everything is everywhere. And so what exists just, around the corner is what used to only exist in the next continent. It's that proximity then that brings us to an interesting challenge as we try to figure out, maybe for the first time, the nature of our choice making and how we can intervene in education and healthcare for sure, in geopolitics, and a host of other areas to simply support the constant evolution of our species. Other than that, it's a very minor thing to worry about.